There is a general belief that low-light videos will result in lower quality, especially when shooting with small sensor cameras like the ones found on compact aerial drones. However, with some noise reduction and having a well-chosen settings, you can achieve decent results even with small sensor cameras. In this video, I will show you my method on how you can turn unusable drone footage into a decent material. The technique can be applied to videos taken by any camera, but I'm using drone footage as an example because when shooting aerial, you rarely can control the amount of light, and drones usually have smaller sensors. The first thing you want to do is to get your drone settings right. It will completely depend on the model of the drone you're using, so you will have to do a bit of research. The settings I'm about to show work best for DJI Mavic 2 Pro. If you open camera settings and click on Style, you can adjust sharpness, contrast and saturation. The most important setting here is sharpness because it will affect the noise pattern. The lower the setting, the more noise reduction the camera will apply, and the higher the setting, the more sharpening will be added. Too much noise reduction will result in unwanted artifacts, while too much sharpening will result in too punchy and unrealistic looking image. So you want to find a value that looks the most natural and closest to the raw image. For Mavic 2 Pro, I find a sharpness value of +1 to create the best looking noise pattern. I also use -1 contrast and 0 saturation, but I think contrast and saturation are not that important. Next, you should keep in mind that too high ISO might not give the best result. It really depends on situation, but I usually shoot with ISO 400 or 800 in low light. Another important setting is shutter speed. We all know the rule to use shutter speed 1/2 times the frame rate, but when shooting in low light, this rule should be broken often. Unless you're doing fast camera movements or flying very close to objects, there will be no excessive motion blur if using slower shutter speeds. But you have to be aware of the flickering issue. I don't want to go into too much detail about it here, but in short, countries use two types of alternating current, 50 Hz and 60 Hz. So depending on which country you're at, you must either adjust the frame rate or the shutter speed to avoid having flickering streetlights in your video. Alright, let's start the editing. I'll be doing everything in DaVinci Resolve, mainly because it has a great noise reduction built in and its utilization of GPU allows for faster workflow and rendering. Once you have your clip, let's create a new node and apply DJI D-Log M2X709 LUT. It doesn't matter what LUT you're using or if you're not using at all, but I find this to be a nice and quick way to create a starting point. Then add another serial node and let's adjust the contrast by using the free wheels, shadows, midtones and highlights. For this use waveform monitor and I would recommend enabling extents box. This will give you a better idea where the highlights and shadows end. For the low light shots I usually clip highlights just a little bit and I never crush shadows. This gives a nice contrast while maintaining the detail. Next, create another serial node and here we will be adjusting saturation. Now you should use vector scope and enable extents as well. I'm also gonna do a bit of hue versus saturation adjustments to boost yellow and orange colors. On another node, find an effect called gamut mapping and change the gamut mapping method to saturation compression. If you have a particular color that is over the top, you can adjust the saturation max, which will put a limit on saturation. Finally, add one more node where we will do the noise reduction. Go to Motion Effects tab and change Temporal and R value to 3 frames. Motion Estimation type to Better and adjust the Luma Chroma values until you get satisfying results. You should always keep a little bit of noise because without any noise, the image looks unrealistic. You can also add just a little bit of sharpening. Now, if you take a closer look into the waveform, you can see that the shadows went up a little bit. This is probably because some of the noisy pixels were dark, and as they disappeared, the waveform went up a little bit. Now we can lower the shadows a bit more, that way creating more contrast. And here is the final result. Another method of reducing the noise is using paid plugin Neat Video. Honestly, I've never seen anything better than this, although DaVinci Resolve gives very similar results and it's already built into the software and the rendering is much faster. Here is a comparison between Neat Video and DaVinci Resolve. Resolve, Neat Video. Resolve, Neat Video. And here is side-by-side comparison.